Thank you. Okay, so yes, I'm Catherine Kendig. I'm in the Department of Philosophy at Michigan State University, which occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabeg Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. I just want to start out by thanking David Ludwig and my fellow panelists for inviting me to this super exciting conference, and to the organizers of the Society of Ethnobiology for all their work in making this conference possible, and also a big shout out to Ashley. Thank you. So I'll just launch straight in. It's the first slide. Yeah. So the language of the Sami of Northern Finnmark reflects their traditional knowledge of the environment and their relationship with the reindeer they herd. There are specialized names for grazing lands and the lichens found there. These names help Sami herders differentiate between lichens and lichens that grow in different seasons, and also between lichens that reindeer eat, which they prefer, which they avoid, and which they'd eat in times of scarcity. So using philosophical methods of inquiry drawn from philosophy of biology, perspectivism, and metaphysics alongside of ethnobotany, I examine the role of specialized ecological relationships in the making and understanding of lichen kinds within Sami lichen naming practices. In particular, I focus on the ways Sami construct ecologically extended linguistic niches within which meaningful botanical kinds are made. So philosophically speaking, this provides a new understanding of the notion of natural kinds as it's used in metaphysics and scientific practice. In standard metaphysics, natural kinds have usually been thought of as an epistemically valuable thing because their existence is thought of as mind independent. However, Sami traditional roots of making kinds, like lichen kinds, show how the epistemic value of these lichen kinds is dependent on the minds, bodies, and ecologically extended relationships of those who make and use and name them. Okay, next slide, please, Ashley. So a biological nomenclature, whether it's academically institutionalized, indigenous, or vernacular, provides a system of labeling that applies to the object of interest. A name fixed to an object of interest contains information about what's known, what's valued, and how it's used. Ethnobotanical research provides ample justification for comparing indigenous naming practices with academically institutionalized ones, like those relying on the International Code of Nomenclature. But doing so also involves the implicit comparison of different ontologies, ecologies, and community narratives. But one philosophical question we might ask is comparison of diverse nomenclatures really possible? Comparing diverse naming practices introduces a suite of epistemic and ontological difficulties and considerations. Some, like Roy Ellen, argue that translation required for the comparison of names leads to substantial information loss. Okay, next slide, please, Ashley. Thanks. So why focus on lichen naming practices? So lichen have been relied upon as a source of food and medicine, the basis of textile dyes, and the material from which litmus dye is derived and used as an indicator for acidity and alkalinity. So initially identified as a single organism and given binomial names by Linnaeus in 1753, lichens were later characterized as a compound being or symbiont by Simon Schwendener in 1869. Defined as a symbiotic system, a lichen is actually a partnership composed of two organisms, or bionts, a fungus, which is called a mycobiont, and a photosynthetic partner, such as algae or cyanobacteria, which is the photobiont. Despite this dual nature, the names given to lichens relying on the International Code of Nomenclature, or the ICN, apply only to their fungal components. So the lichen symbiont as an organic whole is one that can't legitimately be named using Linnaean nomenclature. Next slide, please, Ashley. Thanks. So naturalist Trevor Goward, reflecting on the apparent institutionalized namelessness of lichens, remarked in a series of personal essays on lichens, saying that the only in common names is the human mind actually permitted unequivocally to touch the lichen thallus, that's the lichen body. Lungwort really is a lichen in the same way that Abies lasiocarpa really is a tree. But whereas the institutionalized, this is, I'm following on from him. So I would argue that whereas the institutionalized scientific naming system leaves lichen as a whole kind of nameless, only naming one of the partners within this symbiont, the Sami indigenous names for lichen refer to the actual whole lichen. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. So the Sami live on their ancestral lands, the Sapni region of Finno-Scandia, which covers northern Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Murmansk Oblast of Russia. They speak Finno-Ugric language called Sami, and the Sami language has a clear distinction between lichens and mosses. Distinguishing between these is valuable. Only lichens are a source of food for reindeer, mosses are not. In addition, the Sami distinguish between kinds of lichen using their nutritional effects on reindeer and local ecology. The Sami group the lichen into three kinds: Yogol, Gadna, and Lapo. So Yogol, which is at the bottom here, refers to arbuscular field lichens that reindeer eat. Gadna refers to scaly lichens, such as those living on stones or trees that are also eaten by reindeer, and that's in the middle. And Lapo refers to the hairy-looking beard lichens growing on trees, which is at the top here. So Lapo also are eaten by reindeer, but only as kind of a last resort. They much prefer Gadna or Yogol. Within each of these different kinds, there are also subkinds. For instance, within the Yogol, there are Botka Yogol, Lasta Yogol, and Hosta Yogol. Next slide, please. So Christian Nissen, an ethnographer, geographer, and member of the Reindeer Grazing Commission from 1909 to 1912, collected many of the specialized Sami lichen names and naming practices from interviews with the Sami of northern Finnmark, to be included in an extensive appendix for Bernd Ling's 1921 studies on the lichen flora of Norway. Within this, he records the Sami Jorgen Matthiesen Sara's description of the predictable succession of lichens that grow following a fire. He explains that Nalajogol is the first lichen that grows up when lichens regenerate in a field that has been destroyed by fire. It's the initial lichen. Then Duablo Yogol, next Shmarva appear, and out of Shmarva, Tapa Yogol or Oeve Yogol grow forth. Sami lichen naming practices provide not only the means by which to discriminate between different kinds of lichen in terms of their nutritional value they afford, they also provide the means for ecological management by supplying an understanding of fire ecology and the order of lichen regeneration. The anchoring of Sami lichen names to local ecologies is actually manifest among lichen names in the categories of Gadna and Lapo, which both refer to habitats where lichens grow. Lapo is often named with reference to their arboreal habitats, to the trees on which they're found, like Sakalo Lapo, which is found on birch trees. Ashley, could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. So comparing Sami lichen names with those based on the International Code of Nomenclature, the ICN, rests on an assumption. One I'd like to challenge with a question, which is, can Sami lichen names and the kinds of lichen to which they refer really be compared to ICN lichen names and the kinds to which those names refer? Sami lichen names are anchored in their interactions with the land, lichen reindeer, climate, and the Sami Sida, which is the village assembly. These anchoring relationships make comparisons between Sami and academically institutionalized lichen naming practices problematic. To resolve the problem requires that we begin to identify what's motivating the comparison or the search for some sort of botanical synonym. The reliance on one naming system, for instance, one that is phylogenetically based, to ground the claim of synonymy between Sami and ICN lichen names may not be appropriate. For instance, if what we want to know is how Yogol came to be used by the Sami, we should turn to the Sami ecological relational narratives around reindeer husbandry. Searching for a synonym using one based on phylogeny, like Cladonia stellaris, although generally useful, won't contain any information about how the use of Yogol is anchored in the ontology and ecology of the Sami. But of course, the name Cladonia stellaris was never intended to do that. The upshot of all of this is that the very possibility of comparing lichen names requires extending the position of perspectivism to explain not only the anchoring relationships of Sami ethno-lichenological names and naming practices, but also to any comparisons involving Sami lichen names. Without doing so, Sami lichen names lose their anchoring in the very knowledge-yielding relationships and interactions that give those names meaning. And if you could advance it one more, this is just my thank you. And if you're interested, just tweet me or email me. That's all. Thanks.